Welcome back. In a moment, we'll examine the face-off between Apple and Samsung. But first, here are some other stories to keep an eye on. Human rights organisations say Haiti is bracing itself for a surge in starvation and disease after suffering a direct hit from Hurricane Matthew. The apocalyptic carnage is the worst humanitarian disaster the country has faced since the 2010 earthquake. We know already that 1,000 people have died. One girl under the age of 15 is married every 7 seconds. This is according to a major study undertaken by Save the Children. Researchers say conflict, poverty and humanitarian crises are major factors that leave girls exposed to child marriage, many of them to be partnered with much older men. And hundreds of Ethiopian troops have pulled out of the town in central Somalia. This is the second location vacated by their forces in the past few weeks. Ethiopian soldiers have been part of a 22,000-strong African Union coalition fighting militant Islamist group Al-Shabaab. Tech giant Samsung has hit the headlines again for all the wrong reasons. Their flagship phone, the Galaxy Note 7, has been recalled amid reports of handsets catching fire. 2.5 million phones were recalled just last month, and now the company says they're going to stop selling the handsets permanently. These problems for the South Korean firm come at a crucial time. It's locked in a US Supreme Court battle with its rival Apple, with each accusing the other of copying smartphone and tablet features and designs. The decision on the case will have a big ripple effect throughout the industry. Samsung says the future of innovation is at stake, while Apple says designers need to be able to protect what they create. Ty Genwright tells us more.
The world's largest smartphone makers have been in a tit-for-tat war over patents since 2011. Apple and Samsung, who together sell more than half the world's mobile phones, have now reached the US Supreme Court to resolve who stole whose technology, each accusing the other of copying the features of their smartphones and tablets. It's been a long while since the Supreme Court weighed in on a case about patent infringement. The last it heard was in the 1800s. So what's it all about? Apple says that Samsung infringed patents on its slide to unlock and autocorrect features, as well as the ability to simply tap a phone number within a website and call it. Apple's also accused Samsung of copying the rounded corners and tapered edges of its devices. Back in 2012, a jury in Apple's home state of California backed the tech giant and ordered Samsung to pay more than $1 billion in damages. Samsung appealed and managed to get the damages reduced to $500 million. But here's the thing. Some of the features Apple says that Samsung copied are actually part of the Google Android operating system, which runs the phone. Apple's strategy has been to sue the manufacturers that use Google software on their devices rather than Google itself. The lawsuits ultimately force Google to change the Android software, which is used on most of the Apple iPhone's rivals. Samsung is countersuing, saying that its patents have been infringed on the way in which photos and videos are organized on its devices. It argues that previous rulings set a dangerous precedent for innovation, and the Korean tech heavyweight is backed by others, including Dell, eBay, and Facebook. They say any damages awarded should be calculated on the profits made by the infringing component and not on the device's total sales. Apple disagrees and says it's the design that sells the whole article. There's no way to evaluate how much revenue each feature generates. So now it's up to 8 justices of the US Supreme Court to decide.
To discuss that further, I'm joined in the studio by John McCann. He's the Phones, Tablets and Wearables UK editor for the UK's biggest technology website, TechRadar. It's an extraordinary battle, this, John. It's been going on and on and on. The lawyers must be getting very rich.
Absolutely, yeah. This dates back to 2011, 2012 and talks about phones that you can't even buy anymore. Maybe the most iconic is Samsung Galaxy S2, a fond phone for many smartphone fans. But yeah, it's old news, as it were. This lawsuit isn't anything new. It's just been now upgraded to the Supreme Court after an earlier ruling this year. So it's interesting.
It's multi-layered, isn't it? But
Yes.
one of the complaints at one point in this discussion was that, oh, but you've produced a rectangular slab of glass with some round corners. Now, is Apple maintaining that nobody else is allowed to do it? Because if they are, it's not just Samsung they should be going after.
Absolutely. It's not. That is part of a very complex lawsuit, but it's more that some of Samsung's phone did look very, very suspiciously similar to certain iPhone handsets. And is there a case to be had? Well, it's certainly worth asking the question, and Apple has done that and has done it for several years. And this isn't the only lawsuit we've seen between the two giants of technology, and it's unlikely to be the last. And while this may be at the Supreme Court, this won't be the end of this particular battle.
You think they'll fight each other, they'll continue an appeal, and goodness knows what else afterwards?
Absolutely. Whichever way the Supreme Court rules, either in Apple or Samsung's favour, it will result in more trials to come. So there's no quick fix.
And is it just the physical layout of the phone and the comparison of the two, or is it that the software, Apple and Android operating systems are similar too?
Absolutely. So there's the design aspect, but there's also the layout of a grid of icons on screen, which, you know, we all just assume is a smartphone. That's how phones look now. You have your app icons on screen, but there's also Apple coming in and saying, you know, that was our idea and design, and they're trying
They
to
claim
protect.
we did that first, do they?
Well, in the particular 16 grid that they used on the iPhone, yes, we've seen it on other feature phones, but the particular way they did it on the iPhone, they're saying is theirs, and it was copied by others. And they have a case of protecting their own intellectual property, but at the same time, you can't stifle innovation, which is where Samsung is coming from. So it's an interesting one to follow.
Do you think this is, in a sense, a battle by proxy, and the real target of Apple's lawyers is Google, or Alphabet, as we have to call them now, and effectively Android? I mean, Samsung happened to be one of the world's best-known Android phone makers, and Apple's real argument, is it with Android?
I wouldn't say so, no. Apple, I think, is quite happy to have some competition in the market. Otherwise, it will get a bit stale, and that's not. It realises that consumers want choice, so not everyone will want to choose Apple, but it's quite happy to be a dominant force in the market. So I think it is more a battle, an ongoing sort of triage of lawsuits and complaints and arguments between the two firms as they sort of try and jostle for a position as the biggest, the best technology brands, because they are the two giants of sort of the mobile device world at the moment.
Because there's functionality in the other direction, isn't it, that Android has had, which suddenly Apple will announce 6 months later to say, hey, our new phone or our new operating system does X or Y. And you think to yourself, but hang on, my mate's Android phone did that 6 months ago. So there's an element of copying each other in this world, isn't there? You just perhaps don't have to do it too overtly.
There's absolutely give and take. And in any world, you know, every TV looks the same, sort of. It's a big rectangular box, and no one is trying to claim that they came up with a rectangular box and everyone else has to go do a circle. And there is always going to be this give and take in technology, and it moves so fast, and people are just trying to keep up, and someone will come out with something new, but because of the pace of the technology, people can actually catch up quite quickly and implement their own versions of new things quite easily, whereas in other industries, it's not quite as fluid. And everyone has to sort of accept that phones are going in a general direction. There's only so much you can do with the size and the components and the screen that you have, and what works well for lots of users. It's a difficult one to take a side on and go, you're right, you're wrong. And there's lots of things you can say. You copied this, you copied that. And it is interesting to see where the line is drawn between companies, lawyers, courts, as to where the line is overstepped.
Should we talk about the affordability? At one stage, the award was over $1 billion.
Yes.
That got reduced on appeal, I think. But there could be $500 million, 500 million, or something like that at stake, you know, and Apple is saying, pay that by Christmas or else. Can Samsung, given what's happened today with their latest, highest profile product having to be ceasing production, can they afford to pay that?
Probably. Samsung is still a massive, massive company. It doesn't solely rely on its mobile stream. It's in all kinds of technology, mobile devices, home entertainment, white goods. It's a huge company with lots of money behind it, and also lots of lawyers. So I'm sure there's always sort of loopholes and counter cases that can be had against it. But the Note 7 aspect is not going to help things, and it's already projected to be losing potentially around $19 million US. Against the sales of the Note 7. It thought it would do, and now it won't. So it's not a great time for Samsung, and it won't want to pay $500 million to Apple.
They've been a little mysterious. They haven't really explained the problem, except we think it's the battery, don't we?
We know it's the battery.
We know it's the battery.
And
presumably, batteries are under pressure of A, lasting longer, so each charge must last the maximum amount of time, but B, physically, they want to get smaller. Do you think they're just a victim of this latest attempt to smash those two factors together?
Sure, and you don't really get removable batteries anymore. You know, back in the days of our Nokia 3210s, 3310s, you could take the battery out, buy a new one and stick it in and it all would be merry. But now everyone's going for the beautiful form factors, everything's sealed in tight. There's no air holes. In your computer PC, you've got big, great fans to keep everything cool. You don't have any of that in a mobile phone, so it's an engineering sort of miracle that they managed to keep everything not burning up completely. So pretty much every smartphone is actually very impressive in that fact, and some phones do get quite hot when you do high-intensity tasks. The Note 7 gets too hot and explodes. So there is a fine balancing act, and it looks like something along the way has not gone quite right in that balancing act for Samsung this time around.
Good to talk to you, John. John McCann, thank you.
Thank you.
We end with our Insight Bite. This is a little something that we feel you should know about. And today we take you to Siberia in the far north of Russia, where a cull of 250,000 reindeer by Christmas has been proposed to reduce the risk of an anthrax outbreak. So-called zombie disease is thought to be resurrected when unusually warm temperatures thawed the carcass of a reindeer that had died from anthrax several decades ago, releasing the bacteria. A state of emergency has now been imposed after a 12-year-old boy from the region died after consuming the venison of an infected reindeer. Reindeer herding is an important industry and livelihood for the indigenous peoples in the Yamanets region, but officials are now calling for the reindeer population to be reduced, warning infection can spread rapidly through large herds. Well, that's all for now. I'm Martin Stanford. That was Insight.